Jacko. Yeah, Jacko and Gargos are probably the next topic we'll get into. Ryan is here, so, I'm sure he has things to say about Jacko. What did he tweet me yesterday? How long could it reasonably take to say Jacko is cancer and killing Guilty Gear? Is that what it was? Something like that? Jacko is bad for the game. Let me write out some notes on this so that I don't forget. You know that everything people say about Jacko, they also say about Gargos. Or sorry, I should say they said about Gargos. Because Gargos, his heyday was a little while ago, I should say. He is not popular. And everything that you say or Guilty Gear players say about Jacko, people say it about Gargos. The same thing. Same style of character, and it's for very similar reasons. Is he similar? He's very similar. When I explain him to you, you'll be like, oh shit. I didn't realize the designs of the characters are very similar. And they have a lot of the same tools, actually. And how they work is really comparable. Even where they are in the tier list and their ease of execution and also the game plan, the way people talk about them is very similar too. In terms of game plans to fight against them, in terms of their thoughts and feelings about them, there's a lot of similarities between the characters. That's what I think is cool about them. Right? They're like design-wise and visually, I think the characters are really cool. Gargos has a burst, by the way. He even has a burst that's very similar to a Guilty Gear burst. Why does Gargos have a burst? This is his instinct. His instinct gives him Stone Skin, which is infinite armor. And it has a burst mechanic in it that bursts the armor off of him. It's just like a burst where you can do it while you're being comboed. It's baitable. It's very good. Okay, I think I have enough notes. And if anything else comes to me, then we'll kind of dig into it from there. Let's talk about Jacko and Gargos. So the big discussion this weekend for Guilty Gear in particular is that .Nova won. I'm going to have some coffee. .Nova won Guilty Gear, which is cool, especially because at the time, regional points were coming into play and everything. So he got the W, and it moved Atlanta up on the scoreboards regionally for the Red Bull Conquest Finals. People are really excited about it. People were like, oh yeah, ATL has a good chance to represent here. It was really cool. Almost as cool as Don Cafe hitting me at the 26 months in a row. Thanks very much for the sub. So everybody was really excited about Atlanta doing well there. All the Guilty Gear players in the room were furious. Like every single Gear player I talked to were like, they all had the same kind of thoughts and opinions. And I saw the same thing reflected online, obviously. People talking shit about Nova winning because he plays Jacko. And if you don't know much about Jacko, she's a summon character. And I think typically people dislike this style of character in minigames. Particularly, I think the summon characters people don't like are characters who don't control their minions or their summons. They just do stuff by themselves, right? I think a lot of people feel like that about that style of character. Because I feel like I hear less complaints about like a Zato style character or like a character that has to control their summon or their pet individually than characters that just kind of let them go and they do what they want to do. But when, summon or puppet characters are strong, typically people really dislike them, right? Many people feel like that. Man, you guys are asking a lot of questions that are going to come up in this, so I'm really glad that you guys brought it up. You hate Carl too? Well, everybody hates Carl. He's also a stupid, cheap character, so, Yeah, so I think that the conversation around Jacko is really interesting because a lot of people said like the following phrases and things about her after Jacko won the tournament, right? Nova wins, Jacko wins, and everybody comes up to me. And the first thing I said, I was like, man, that was cool, Guilty Gear. And like the very first thing I heard was, that wasn't Guilty Gear, that was Jacko, which was really funny. And then the following thing was, that character is cancer, she's not Guilty Gear, and she's bad for the game. That was like one of the first things that I heard when the tournament was over, which cracked me up because in Killer Instinct, they really say the same thing about Gargos, especially when he was at his peak, when he was his strongest, and you saw a lot of Gargos. People did not like that character. I still don't think he has a positive perception in the community because he is a very similar design to that character in a lot of different ways. So I know that there's people probably watching this that don't know much about Jacko. There's people watching this probably don't know much about Gargos. And then there's people that watching that don't know anything about either. They have a lot of similarities in their characters and playstyles. So Jacko, what she does is she plants these houses, right? That's like the primary thing that Jacko does. And these houses level up over time and they summon minions. And when the minions level up, right, they're level 1, 2, 3. When they hit the highest level, they're extremely difficult to deal with. And just like Gargos, she doesn't have to control what the minions are doing necessarily, right? So she just sort of house. And as long as she's not getting hit, the minions are going to be out. They're going to be on the screen. they're going to be a threat that you have to deal with, right? Gargos is very similar. So Gargos, the minions are just one of the mechanics that the character has. He has to spend meter to summon them, which makes them already cost more than Jacko, because Jacko can just, plant houses, right? She can also throw the houses at people, which is hilarious, and we'll get into why that's a funny thing too. Gargos has to use meter to summon a minion, right? KI, you can store 2 meters at once. It costs 1 meter to summon a minion. If you have 2 bars, you just summon. One of the minions has 3 hits of life. He's fatty. He's the bigger one. Then there's Stabby, which is the skinny little minion. He has 2 hits, right? Any 2 hits, and the character's dead. Any 3 hits for the other guy, he's dead. That's how they work, right? So they both have minions that they can summon. Gargos only gets 2 out on the screen. He has a couple of interactions that he can do with his minions. For instance, he can pick his minions up with his command throw. So if you do the command throw with Gargos and you do it next to your minion, you'll pick up your minion and you can throw it at your opponent. You can use your minion as a projectile, right? Kind of like her picking up a house and throwing it, sort of. So you can grab your boy and then throw him. You can also pick up your minion with your command throw and you can hit back and eat the minion. So let's say you have the fat minion. He's been hit 3 times, right? Or 2 times. So he has 1 hit point left. You pick up the minion, eat him, and you get meter back for eating him, right? So that's really useful for Gargos as well. He can recycle the minions, which is pretty good. He has a move associated with the minions that allows him to have the minions play back, play forward, or do their special moves. If they've existed on the screen long enough, they start to glow purple and they have special moves that they do. The special moves are okay. They don't really matter that much. But you can start to see there's a lot of comparisons between these characters. They both have command throws. Gargos' command throws are very good. They're really, really good. His grappling is very strong. It's very risky for him to deal with. He has an invincible reversal. It's not that great, but he can cancel it into his instinct, and that's very strong. So he can kind of safely activate in it. When Gargos is an instinct, he has infinite armor. When he has minions out, infinite armor, and then he has a burst available as well. He's a very pesky character. And when Gargos was very strong, people hated him. They said that Gargos wasn't playing KI. They said that his minions were stupid. They said that he should have been nerfed. They said this and that. And I feel like a lot of people say they have the same conversation around the character Jacko, right? Some of the main things I heard this weekend is that Jacko's not Guilty Gear. She's cancer for the game. She's a stupid character, blah, blah, blah. Which I think is very comparable, right? You hear that kind of conversation around both characters really commonly. And the other conversation you hear about these characters, interestingly enough, just to kind of play the other side, is that I hear a lot of people say, if you want to beat this character, just play X character. And the reasons are always the same, right? The reasons are always the same. If you want to beat Jacko, play X character. They just destroy the houses so easily. Play Axel. You just destroy the houses. She can't get in. Easy game, easy life, right? If you want to beat Gargos, play Jago. You just throw charge of fireballs, kill the minions, easy game, easy life, right? People would say stuff like that about both of the characters. But I think oftentimes against characters like this, that's an underselling the strategy of the matchup, right? When first of all, you're saying that the solution to the character is just counterpicking, which, is not always an option. Sometimes you're a character loyalist, or sometimes you're not interested in playing other characters. Secondly, I think with both of these characters, just destroying the summons is a very small part of a much bigger matchup, right? Just because you're trying to destroy the houses doesn't mean that won't get hit by Jacko, right? What if the houses are on the opposite side of the screen and Jacko's on this side of the screen and she's just running offense or something, right? You can't just destroy the houses right there. What if Gargos sandwiches you between the minions and they're behind you? You can't swing at them. You can't hit them, right? What are you going to do about it in that situation, right? It's destroying the houses or destroying the minions is a very small part of a much larger matchup. And I think that because of these characters require more strategy to fight against than the normal, oh, that's minus this, I can punish it with that. Oh, this is minus this, I can punish it with that. Look out for these moves in the mid-range. There's a constant decision that has to be made every single time you have free space in the neutral, right? Every single time you have a pressure opportunity, every single time you land a hit, there has to be a conscious decision made by the player fighting against this character, which is, do I go for the minions or the houses after this, do I press, right? That has to constantly be a decision you make against these characters. Against Gargos, it's, do I extend this pressure and try to find them, even though I know the minions are back there and they're going to come for me? Against Jacko, it's like, do I end this combo and try to pressure her and just hope that she doesn't, like, you know, dead angle or blitz or burst and escape and then the houses are still alive or something, right? Like, am I going to continue my offense like this, or should I just backtrack and go for the houses? You saw a lot of people, like, get hits against Jacko, take a knockdown, and instead of, like, going in super hard, people would IID back and then, like, try to hit the houses, right? So, like, there was one time, I think, where Kizzy hit, like, I'll hit something eventually with Sin, and then he, like, IID back and started hitting the houses, right? He did, like, 5K, 3K, and then was, like, trying to destroy houses instead of taking Oki instead of eating or something like that. It's the same thing against Gargos. You'll knock him down, and then, like, you'll do a hard knockdown ender. And then instead of chasing for a knockdown, you're like, I'm going to jump back and then try to hit the minions. Sometimes the minions hit you instead of you hitting them, and you're like, fuck, I gave up my Oki, and I got hit by the minions. Like, this is the worst. This is the worst thing that could have happened, right? So, yeah, because his minions don't disappear when he gets hit. Against Jacko, it's a little different, right? So there constantly has to be that decision made in your head against these characters. That extra layer of strategy makes them more difficult to fight against. In particular, I think in tournament, that having to quickly make that decision after every single thing you do is an extra layer of stress that other characters don't always require you to think about, right? Because these kind of characters are always a ticking time bomb. When Jacko's set up or when Gargos is set up, it's a nightmare for the opponent to deal with, right? So you constantly have to fight to prevent that from happening. That requires you to commit resources being health or meter, right? So you're constantly forced into making that decision. I think in particular in a tournament setting, that is when it gets hard, right? That's when it's like the hardest. When you have to make that choice in tournament, life or death scenarios, it's very easy to make the wrong choice. Even if it seems like it's going to be the right choice at the time, right? But that's like kind of the game plan that's surrounded by both of the characters. And anytime those characters have success, like the number one thing you hear is, like we said, is that character's not Guilty Gear, Gargos isn't Killer Instinct, he's playing fucking StarCraft, or he is playing fucking, you know, whatever, right? Like he's playing MOBA, or, you know, whatever it is. It's always like the same kind of conversation built around those characters. You said, Ryan says, it's funny because I think the strategy of the aspect of the matchup has great potential, but it's exactly like where they failed her execution. There's no punishment for Jacko getting her houses destroyed. Right. That's one thing that I think Gargos, he's had changes to the way he works. And I think that's probably one of the better parts about his summons compared to Jacko's. When Gargos summons a minion, if it dies, it costs him resources to do it again. Now, he builds lots of meter, but they've nerfed the hard knockdown opportunities he has so that he can't just set up minions freely, because that became the prevalent strategy, was build meter, hard knockdown, summon. Like run offense with the summon, hard knockdown, summon. So that was kind of like the strategy that character had. So, you know, he's had changes to that. That's what the difference about Jacko. But there's also this. When you hit Jacko, you don't have to worry about the minions coming from behind you and hitting you, right? That's one thing that you have to remember about, or that's one difference between them, right? Is that when Gargos gets hit, his minions don't stop moving or doing stuff. So in KI, the advantage Gargos has is he can try to break your combo. Let's say he tries to break your combo and you get counter broken. It's like, oh no, this is the worst thing that could happen. Counter breakers guaranteed 50, 60, 70% of life, right? And then all of a sudden you're doing this combo, and just like imagine a 2D screen. You just see the guy, he's like, blah, 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 he's doing this combo. And then right behind him, you just see the minion coming up like, oh, you thought you had this counter breaker combo, bitch. Ha! And he hits you. And then Gargos combos off the minion hitting you from the counter breaker combo you had. And you're like, no, this can't be real. I was right. I got the hit that got the combo. I fucking counter broke your stupid bitch ass, and then I got comboed for it. It's like the ultimate, like, this can't be real, right? So, like, that's, you know, interestingly enough, like, that's what Gargos has. Other parts about him, they're like mini Faust, sure, but I'll tell you what, this motherfucker Stabby is much worse than a mini Faust. He anti-airs you. The Stabby minion of Gargos is better than 90% of fighting game players. He has good footsies, and he can anti-air. So already one of Gargos' minion, the AI, is better than most fighting game players, right? That minion is a little motherfucker. He'll anti-air you all day. Dude, his anti-airs are so good. You can't jump in on his bitch ass. I'm telling you. He's a motherfucker. For sure. And he's always been a motherfucker. The fat one, he's not that bad. But the skinny one, he's a little shithead. There's a reason he only has 2 hits of life instead of 3. Anyway, to get back on track, what I like about summon characters is that they create this different strategy. This is what we're talking about, right? The strategy of, do I kill the house? Do I kill the minion? Do I focus on pressuring the character and hope it doesn't matter? And then the summoner has the same things. Do I protect the minion or do I just take the damage, right? Gargos has projectiles, so when you're trying to hit the minions from full screen, he can hit you with a combo. Oftentimes that's that's pretty low damage, but it can be consequential, right? So, you know, he has to make that choice. And Jacko's the same way. Do I press, knowing that if I get hit, I could lose the round just giving up my house? Both of these games, KI and Guilty Gear, by the way, have extremely oppressive offense, right? That's one thing about them. Extremely strong, dangerous offense. Both of them have good system mechanics that can defend them, right? They have defensive system mechanics to help them out and stuff, right? Combo breaking or shadow countering in KI. And obviously in Guilty Gear, there's burst, dead angle, blitz, right? You have different options. IBing, FDing. You have different options than other characters, right? A lot of people were coming in here and saying the same thing. A lot of people who maybe are not as familiar with Guilty Gear are like, isn't Johnny better than Jacko? Isn't like these 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 characters, aren't they all better than Jacko? Why are people complaining about Jacko? And Gargos is very similar. I think that Gargos, even at his strongest, was not the best character in the game. In fact, a lot of people had him as like a top 5 character for a while, and I don't know if I thought that he was that strong. I think on paper he was weaker than people thought, and he had more bad matchups than people thought, especially because in KI, unlike Guilty Gear, people tend to have many pocket characters, so counterpicking someone is much more common in that game than it is in Guilty Gear. But I think the same conversation arose about Gargos, which was, both of these characters, I don't think either people don't think that they're in the very best characters in the game, right? They're not in the S tier characters usually, but people still hate them just as much as those characters, because of their designs and because of the nature of their game plan. And I think that both of them make for extremely strong tournament characters, right? What I talked about earlier is having to make the split decision and strategy, the split like that just moment where I'm like, fuck, I have to make a decision. Do I go after the houses or the minions, or do I go after the character? Decisions like that, and decisions like sacrificing Oki or offense or meter or whatever to handle a secondary objective on the screen, is very hard to make the correct decision very quickly about in tournament. And I think that that is a very strong thing to have, right? Much like I think that certain characters are great tournament characters because they're easy. You know what I mean? Some characters are excellent in tournament because they're simple. Jack is a great example in Tekken, right? Extremely simple, strong character. Shaheen, a lot of people said, is excellent in tournament. Really strong, simple tournament character, right? I think the conversation comes up in Melee a lot because in Melee, there's a lot of really good characters that take high execution, and then there's Jigglypuff, right? I think that in Street Fighter, the conversation comes up with Cammy or Guile, right? I think in almost every game, there's a character who is not maybe the best character, but in a tournament environment, they are considered strong because they're just simple. Bardock, right? So there's other characters that like are extremely simple, and that's just kind of how that makes them better tournament characters. I think summon characters are also excellent tournament characters because of the reason I brought up earlier, which is they require even characters that are simple to make hard decisions. You know what I mean? So even if you're playing a very simple character with a very simple game plan in KI, you're fighting Gargos, you suddenly have to make more complicated decisions. The advantage of playing a simple character is that usually your game plan is straightforward, the options you have are solid and simple, and you just sort of commit to that, just like you've committed to 17 months in a row of segues. Thanks very much, Unsung Hero. What up, Romanova? So you guys see what I mean, right? When I talk about easy characters in tournament being strong, I think summon characters automatically make your game plan in tournament be a little bit more complicated, and I think that that's a big strength to have. It's so funny because in the chat alone, there's a lot of discussion about ways to nerf Jacko, ways to change Gargos, like all this stuff. There's something about summon characters that just make them additionally tougher to fight and more frustrating, right, than other fighting game characters. The strategy aspect of them doesn't seem to make up for the difficulty of fighting them. And I think there's an interesting conversation to be had here about one of the core things about designing concepts for characters and stuff like this is taking in consideration your lovely subscribers like Noricon, who hit me with the 4 months. Thanks very much. One of the interesting things to think about when you make characters or think about characters is the how frustrating they are to fight against versus the enjoyment you get out of playing them and where the balance is, right? That's like another important thing about fighting characters like Gargos or fighting characters like Jacko. It's another thing to think about for the designers or the developers of the game. But another point I was going to get onto about Jacko and Gargos is that I think both of them are pretty easy characters to execute or play with. I think Gargos was supposed to be an extremely complicated design. I don't know that Jacko was supposed to be that way, but Gargos was supposed to be a complicated character. He is supposed to be a character that just has tons of system mechanics, extremely in-depth. But like all games these days, I think even the hardest characters very quickly get boiled down into a really strong strategy very quickly. And I think because of that, both of them end up being very straightforward, simple characters to execute with. The difficulty comes in their game plan and oftentimes surviving the offensive onslaught. Neither of them are like particularly proficient at that. They're not bad at it. Jacko's probably better on defense than Gargos is. He's not very great on defense. They're pretty straightforward to play. The difficulty comes in the strategy, executing the strategy, and sort of just not getting blown up in a game where offense is extremely potent. It's very easy to die very fast, even with good system mechanics. In terms of defense and stuff. Both of the games have a lot of defensive system mechanics to bail you out of situations, but it's still sometimes not enough, right? That's what's interesting about it. And it's funny to me because I don't play Jacko in Guilty Gear, but I played a lot of Gargos in KI. He wasn't my main character, but for a while he was a secondary that I played probably more than almost any other character. At one point he might have been my strongest character, and I loved playing him. But I can recognize that there is an extreme frustration in fighting a character like that. And I don't think people will ever stop being frustrated at summon characters, and I also think that they're extremely hard to balance. Because you can end up in a situation where you have like a Jacko in a game where people absolutely despise her, even at the current level where she is, or you could have Zato, which is very weak in this version of Guilty Gear, right? And it's hard to find something in between. Maybe Gargos' current balance is in between these two characters. It's definitely hard with puppet characters. They're dangerous characters to make strong. I should show you guys a Gargos clip. Oh, man. There's like one Gargos clip that just came to my mind that's like worth watching. So for those of you guys who aren't as familiar maybe with Gargos, he's this big fucking gargoyle here. This is Stabby. On the left there. He's the minion with 2 hit points. He's better than most of the fighting game players that go to your locals. He has excellent anti-airs, and he has really good footsies. So this is a projectile that Gargos has called a portal punch. And then the minion pops him up, and then you get an anti-air command throw. And then you throw him down on the floor. And what does good old Stabby do? Stabby hits him again, and then Gargos dashes up for a combo. Ends it at the wall. You get a guaranteed command throw. And then this little motherfucker's still up. See, Gargos gets hit, and the minion doesn't go away. He does eat a hit there, though, unfortunately. And the minion dies. But you know how Gargos is, right? He'll just summon another one. I wonder if he summons in this clip again. I was on commentary there, and you can hear me freaking out. But Gargos has a projectile. He has a very good one. Stuff like that, right? One of the issues I mentioned with summon characters is how easily they can find summons. Look at this. Heavy portal punch, which is an anti-air. Kills, and because KI you can do stuff between rounds, he gets a summon here. And so, like I mentioned, it costs bar to summon, unlike Jacko, but the minions are much more deadly when they're out and in surviving situations. The general strategy that Gargos will do is he has a quad jump, so he will jump and fly to the other side of the screen, and this little motherfucker down here won't be hit. And then you get sandwiched very easily, right? So, yeah, he just sandwiched him right there. It's like, it happens so fast. And then look at this. The minion still comes up during the combo. Unlike Jacko, he has the opportunity to break a combo, the opportunity for the minion to mess with the combo. He has his instinct, which gives him a burst. Like, yeah, he has a lot of escape options, too, just like her. You can summon in certain situations, but not all. Right there, like, if you end a round and you still have an action available, you can do it. So essentially, There is a lot of times where you can end with something and then still get a summon out. Like if you kill with a command throw, you'd still get a summon. It's pretty pesky. Anyway, Gargos is a very frustrating character to fight. He won an Evo. So, Guilty Gear players, that could be worse. Jacko could have won an Evo for you. They can interrupt during block strings. Gargos' minions can interrupt during block strings. They can also interrupt while you're being comboed. They don't go away like Jacko's minions do. So, if he has a quad jump, he just goes whoom, 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 and flies over you. And then now you're sandwiched between the minions. You hit Gargos. He tries to break your combo. It doesn't work. Then the minions walk up and just poke you in the back, and you lose your combo anyway. Sometimes the minions walk up and they get hit anyway, and that's great. But sometimes they don't. And then when you knock Gargos down, you have to make a decision. Do you go and chase the minions, or do you just take the Oki on Gargos? And like I said about Jacko earlier, you have to make the same decision. You know what I mean? So because of that, there's very similar just like thought process you have to make about both of them. Do I kill the houses? Do I kill the minions? Do I focus on the character? And that's where the strategy comes in. Sometimes the strategy and the fun of the summon character don't balance out with how strong or frustrating the summon character is to fight against. But it's a cool discussion. I think Jacko is cool. I think she's a very frustrating character to fight against, but I like her. And it's probably because I played Gargos, and I think that character is fun. Although, I really dislike Zato being strong. So, it just depends on the character and depends on the character design. Zato is such a shithead. Probably because it's just like Gargos. I jump out of this stupid bitch Gargos command throw, and then Stabby hits me out of the air anyway. I'm like, you motherfucker. I just wanted to jump out of the command throw. It's like Nobiru. I jump out, and then I get counter hit trying to FD, and I get crossed up or something, and I get a button, and I'm like, no. That's the worst feeling, for sure, in Guilty Gear. When you jump and try to FD out of Nobiru, or out of a command throw or something, and you get hit by that, oh boy, it feels bad. You get counter hit because you side switch and a button comes out.